makes me feel like a man.
You want every team to lose any other game?
Sorry. Bailey Zappi just did another time.
You know what? Whoa, time out.
Are you kidding?
That's what I'm
I'm gonna try to drop a mic. Welcome to the Warner Brothas Podcast. My name is Keenan, joined by my brother Kyle. Kyle, actually, how did you enjoy the UFC fights yesterday? I heard you went up to the classic Andrews camp to watch it with the boys. So how was that?
Yeah, me and Andrew caught the fight. It was all right. It was one of the more generic cards of the year. I actually did not catch any of the prelims, which normally I catch at least the early prelims or the main prelims, I should say. The main card itself, out of the 5 fights, the championship fight was the most entertaining. The co-main event that should have been like the next entertaining fight, it was cool. It was like a 5-6 out of 10. It could have brought fireworks. It really didn't. Good fight nonetheless. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. I guess the highlight of the night outside of the championship fight was Kevin Holland breaking his opponent's arm. That was like, I think 2 minutes into the first round. So it was a very quick night of fights. I say that, but I mean, it still ended around 1:30 a.m. But yeah, probably one of the most generic cards of the year so far. But stacked schedule coming up. Championship fight delivered. That's all that matters. Shouts to Dustin Poirier. Shouts to Islam Makhachev. They put on a show. They did what they had to do. It was a true championship fight for sure. But very loaded schedule coming up, especially in June for the UFC.
Doesn't Conor fight in a couple weeks?
Conor and Michael Chandler, they fight on June 29th, last weekend of June for International Fight Week, which usually is the first week of July. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a good one. And that card's like okay right now. It's pretty good. So I'm very interested to see how that turns out. I have a few theories about that fight that I'm hoping to talk to Trent about. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But no, good fight overall. Not as great of a card as I thought it was going to be, but hey, happens sometimes.
We'll see if we can sneak Trent on this to talk that before, because we also be able to talk a little bit of the NBA Finals that's coming up. Big news, Kyle, because of when I'm coming up from the 16th to the 26th. If we get to fight Game 5 and 6, I'll actually be there to watch like Game 6. I think it's on a Wednesday. So I'll actually be up to watch like around Game 6, which I think it at least should get to 6. We don't know, though, with how these playoffs are going about what's going to happen, but I think it should get to 6. We'll at least be able to watch a game together, which would be cool. But
yeah, I think Game 7 would be Sunday the 24th, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, and that's within the week that I'm there, because I think it's Wednesday, and then it'd be Sunday or Thursday, Sunday, something along those lines. I'd be there for Game 6 and Game 7. Game 5 is a little iffy, but Game 6 and 7, I'd absolutely be there for. So if we get a Game 7, I can be at home in the building, which would be great. But speaking of a Game 7 that I thought was going to happen in the series, but clearly it didn't, Mavericks and Timberwolves, that ended in 5 because Luka said no in the first quarter, and then Kyrie said, okay, if that's how you're going to play in the first half, I'll come on in the second half and just put them away. What were your thoughts on Game 5? And then we'll talk preview of the finals here in a moment. What are your thoughts of Game 5, and if you have any overall thoughts on the series?
Game 5. Because did they get to it? It seems like it got to a Game 6, no?
Nope.
No, that's right. What if Game 6 would have been in Dallas? Yeah, you're right.
Back in Minnesota. Because I thought they were getting to 6. Once they got to 4, I thought they were going to get to 6, and they were going to end them in 6. But no, Luka just said, I don't even feel like I just want my victory beer that Michael Finley decided to steal. But
I was so fixated and certain that there would be at least a Game 6 that, yeah, you're right. I guess it was Game 5. No, I mean, hey, for a team, the Timberwolves, for a team whose role players have showed up the entire playoffs, for them not to show up at home, and really all you got was a good and Towns performance, and really that was only in the second half of that game. Probably a disappointing way for them to end the season, to say the least. But, it happens. And the Mavericks, I mean, you saw, just like you said, when you got Luka and Kyrie on the other side and they're locked in and they're scoring at that high a level and they can collectively as a team play pretty good defense, honestly. It's hard to overcome. And they brought it back, I think, to below 15 in the second half at one point, but just weren't able to get it done. Just were not able to get it done. And I think Dallas and the Celtics is going to be a fantastic finals. I love that matchup. I can't wait not only to watch it, I cannot wait to talk about it today. Not much thoughts on Game 5 because really that's all it boiled down to was finally you got and Towns to show up in back-to-back games. And, you know, the role players were just nowhere to be found. And like you said, I mean, I don't know what Luka's like sick, twisted fantasy is with elimination games where he can just like overwhelm you in the first half, but it reminded me very much of that Game 7 with the Suns a few years back. I could be wrong about this, but I just have like vivid memories of it being like 71-29 in the first half. I could be wrong about that, but that one got completely out of hand.
It was close to that because I know the Mavericks had 70 and they were at least doubling up the Suns in that game. It was a rout early. I think at one point they were down 50 in a Game 7 at home. That can't.
Yeah, it very well might have been 71-29 because I just remember it was extremely awkward because it was like the second quarter. They were down, like you said, 30 plus, 40 plus points damn near. And it was just dead quiet in there. Dead quiet. Like, what's the crowd to do? You can't leave. I mean, you could leave. That would have been smart to leave, but they didn't know what to do. And
it was
this
57-27 at half. They scored 27 points in the first half. That is.
Yeah. This game was very reminiscent of that because I think this game they were down 28 at the half. The Wolves were something like that. So that's what it reminded me of. Shouts to the Mavericks. Shouts to the Timberwolves too because you know they had a fantastic season as well. Yeah, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe it's finals time already.
Yes.
And oftentimes, I mean, it seems like every year when we do this, Keenan, whether it's football, whether it's the NBA Finals, you can throw whatever predictions we do out the window because, you know, like I said last time, the Game 7s never seem to match up. Seems like me and you will have 3 or 4 Game 7 series, maybe even more. And it seems like this year we got 3 this year. And it seems like if there's a consensus finals, one will make it, the other often does not, especially in the NFL. But it happens less, or it happens more often than you think in the NBA, where you don't get the matchup that everyone thinks is going to happen. So, especially
since this quote unquote super team era is over with. Obviously, like the Warriors were going to get there, and then LeBron just happened to consistently get there. The Heat were, when they were the super team, they were going to get there. And then in the West, the Spurs with their juggernaut that they had created, basically just a machine rather than a juggernaut. They got there a few years, but
still, even then, that's only one side of it. Like this year, we got the Celtics. We thought the Celtics would be there.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people thought Celtics Nuggets, but even during that Heat run, oftentimes we didn't get the team we thought.
No, because the first year we didn't think we were going to get the Spurs. We thought we'd possibly get the Thunder again, and then the Spurs ended up getting there. And then the second year,
remember first year they got the Mavericks. I didn't mean the first year. I meant like the first year of the Spurs. But yeah, they got the Mavericks, which was completely shocking. Then they got the Thunder, which made sense on the timeline, but even still, you were like maybe not. Then they got the Spurs, which was a little shocking. Then they got the Spurs again. That one made sense. That Spurs Heat rematch made sense to me. I've only because I've just been doing like deep dives on early Heat LeBron. I remembered. So 13 wasn't surprising that it was the Spurs. 12 was surprising with the Thunder because I don't know if you remember this, Keenan. Spurs had like something like an 18 game like winning streak going into the postseason that continued through the postseason. They killed the Jazz in the first round. Oh, yeah. We're coming off, just to remind you, we're coming off the LeBron Mavericks debacle. And I remember the consensus feeling being around the semifinals being like, damn, it doesn't even matter how good the Heat are. Spurs look like they're going to win it this year. And LeBron's just going to be out again. Then I think the Spurs are up 2-0 on the Thunder, and then the Thunder win 4 straight, and they get them in the finals. And then 13 and 14 was a bit of redemption for the Spurs. But that was a wild run. 13, we got what we wanted because I think that's the year Westbrook got hurt from Pat Bev. I believe, because I think that was Yeah, I think that was the year. Yeah, because 12 was the Thunder. So yeah, 13 must have been the year he got hurt, and then 14 obviously collision course again for the two teams. But yeah, I've been in my 2010s basketball bag this
I
week
love
for
it.
whatever reason. So
I actually been diving in a little bit to Dwayne Wade, which is where, oddly, it's weird that you're doing that because I was leading into Dwayne Wade. I watched, again, LeBron James Game 6 versus Boston. So I was in a little bit of the 2010s too without even knowing. But this is where I'm going with it because Anthony Edwards reminds me of kind of early Dwayne Wade right now. Obviously, they don't have like the same exact trajectory when it comes to like how they went on because Wade got to the second round his first year, and then after that, I think he was first round and then out, and then they got to the conference finals, and first year, second round, third year was the conference finals, and then they got the championship the next year. They kept going, one every time, but Antfield, I know obviously we heard a lot of baby Jordan and baby Kobe, and obviously Wade's in that conversation more so than people will actually admit and kind of give credit for. I think that Anthony Edwards reminds me a lot of Dwayne Wade. He did early on. That was his comparison coming out of college more so than it was Kobe Mike. And I see a lot of Dwayne Wade in him when it comes to that tenacity. I mean, all of them kind of have the similarities. But the reason why I was bringing this up was the Olympics are this year. Think of, you have pointed out on even before we did the podcast a while ago, the year after the Olympics, because of themselves playing so much during the summer, typically the younger stars have like their best season. And that was when Wade had his best individual season. He was in his prime at that point, but that was his 30 points, 7.5 assists, 5 rebounds. They went 43 and 39, and that's the only reason why he didn't win the MVP. I still don't care. In my heart, he was the MVP that year, even though LeBron was really good. But he did average more points, assists, steals, and blocks, and shot better from the field than LeBron that year. I was looking into that just the other day. But I think Ant could possibly do something like that next year. I think next year, regular season, I think Luka's probably going to be the betting favorite going into the season, especially coming off of this, regardless of how it turns out. But I think Anthony Edwards could be definitely a dark horse for sure to win the MVP next year. And I think it's because off of this Olympics, you have the conference finals run, and it could be really interesting for him. But my takeaway, go on before I say anything else.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think those would be the two favorites next year, and I think Luka will be, like you said, the betting favorite. I think if Luka he could mail it in and have whatever type of season, as long as they're a 3 seed and his stats are somewhere close, he's gonna win it. He's gonna win it because his stats have been good enough to win it really since his second year.
The last 5 years, he's all NBA first team 5 years in a row. So
it's insane. He's got more first team All NBAs than Steph Curry, than a lot of greats. I was extremely shocked to see he had more first teams than Steph Curry because it seems like Curry would have at least 6 or something like that. But
Steph's career is so odd because like he's been so impactful in like a 7-year stretch. It's been like it really just been like a 7-year stretch of Steph Curry being like what he is today. Obviously, he came second in Rookie of the Year to Tyreek Evans, and then he had all the ankle injuries here and there, which kind of obviously derailed what the plans were, but then they ended up trading Monte Ellis, got Bogut. There was a real conversation if Steph was going to be the future. He was. Mark Jackson's there. They get to the first round Clippers. Then they obviously get on their winning streak and winning championships, and that's really when Steph splashed onto the scene, no pun intended. But that's kind of like, it's weird because you would think, okay, Steph's been in the league like 14 years. You would think he'd have like 7, as you said. He only has 4. And that's because he was so great in a short period of time. But then you still had people like James Harden, Russell Westbrook, who both won MVPs when Curry was in his prime. There's one season in there that he still had injuries, and then he had the broken wrist too. So it's odd to think, but yeah. And he's still an all-time, obviously still like roughly around a top 10 player of all time, but it's crazy. Luka's on his way for like 10.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the Anthony Edwards comparison, he does not remind me of Dwayne Wade. Really, nobody reminds me of Dwayne Wade, who's been in the league. His
That's fair.
mentality, I guess, reminds me of Dwayne Wade.
No, that's more so what
But
I meant. Like, not exactly his game, because the way Wade finished at the basket and like his like whatever, but like I more so mean mentality, kind of his build, that 6'4" but a
I
little
mean,
stockier kind of build,
yeah, I
that
mean,
kind of thing, more so.
if you're going by mentality, he fits all those two guards. It's Jordan, like he's the lineage. It goes from Jordan to Kobe to Dwayne Wade, then to Ant.
Yeah,
As far as game goes, though, I mean, I've never seen since really Mike and Kobe, probably early Mike. I mean, it's before my time, but as far as attacking the rim, like Dwayne Wade was just relentless at the rim. Iverson too. Uh,
mm-hmm.
Dwayne Wade played so inside out. Really like the relentlessness of a Westbrook. I've made that comparison on here before.
Yes.
Maybe if you fuse like Kobe and Michael's game a little bit with like Westbrook's mentality or something like that, or just his relentlessness, I should say. That's what Dwayne Wade was early on and in his prime. Like you just could not keep him from the rim. Had an array of moves. One of the best at splitting the pick and roll. So I get what you're saying, but he actually reminds me more of young Kobe. Anthony Edwards does, where they can each get to the rim. They can each just dunk on you whenever they want. They can just explode over you, and they each have a nice pull up. Kobe's is probably a little better, but he reminds me more of Kobe at age 22, the way Ant is. So like he seems to be on the trajectory. I think we're a few years away. I think we're a few years away from Ant really having a good jump shot. I mean, he's got a good jump shot right now. Don't get me wrong, but like a knockdown jump shot.
I know what you mean.
So I don't know. That's going to be scary when he develops that. But
yeah, no, I don't actually disagree with that at all. And I think that when you say the word Kobe Bryant, I think a lot of people who are the Kobe like stans and like super fans and everything out there, they're like, well, no, he's not Kobe, because they instantly think of like, oh, well, he's a 5-time champion. Oh, well, he's obviously an MVP, could have 2 MVPs, but like regardless, whatever, they think of just like peak Kobe, top 10 kind of player. But I feel like a lot of people, when you make these comparisons, they never think about what early Kobe was, and that's what we're seeing from Ant right now, year 4 Kobe. A lot of the same kind of things. That's like a little bit of the inconsistency, because Kobe could at times just kind of not the same way of Ant kind of gets a little bit less aggressive, more so like how LeBron was rather than Kobe. But Kobe would have just bad games where he would get you 8 points, where he'd get you kind of like those games, but people don't really remember those. They remember more of obviously the highlights. And then they think of Kobe, they think of that 35 in a game, or 35 in a season, 81 in a game, 60 in 3 quarters. They think of that kind of Kobe, but Ant, he may never get to like that level of scoring, because that's obviously an insane level of scoring. But the mentality and the way he plays, definitely he's on that Kobe trajectory. So I like the comparison with Kobe. Obviously the mentality, body style of Wade, but yeah, all in that aspect. And Karl-Anthony Towns, I think, played pretty well these playoffs, up and down. Going forward, it's really going to be on him, on how far the Timberwolves go, unless they move on from him, which I don't think they should. I think they should run it back at least one more year. Because a lot of it was role players when it came towards the end. I think they should run it back. Obviously, maybe get a role player or 2, but keep the same nucleus and go from there, because I think you have a lot of young stars who can develop, and Ant should get better. As I said, I think Anthony Edwards probably second in MVP betting in my head right now. I would go Luka, then him, because I think he's going to be poised for maybe close to 30 this year, coming off an Olympic run.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think this T-Wolves team probably has like a 2-year window, like after this year, with Gobert and Towns and Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley. If I was them, I would want to move Conley in a backup position. He'd be a perfect backup. Maybe get you a starting point guard. Yeah, man. I mean, Towns didn't have the greatest conference finals, neither did Ant, especially if your Towns shooting the ball. He'll always get into foul trouble. He will have stupid fouls. But it was definitely, even with all that, I still felt like it was an improvement from his past postseason performances, where he just looked kind of clueless and had no rhythm for the game. He looked at ease. And even when he was shooting bad, he didn't stop shooting. He didn't stop attacking. So, I mean, I even came here and said, I think it was after that game 4 or game 3. I forget which game it was after, but he had a terrible game. And I liked how he was attacking. Like the stats looked terrible, Right. Yes, it was. Yeah. The stats look terrible, but he was still being aggressive and being attacking and not settling on his jump shot, which is a good thing. And he was rewarded in game 4 and 5. I really do like what I saw out of him. So hopefully they can build on that. Very intriguing team. But hey, the West is going to get better. We know the Nuggets are going to be better next year. We know, Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, they're all a question mark. But all these young teams, the Thunder, the Mavericks, obviously, they're all going to be there.
Kings are still going to be there. Spurs
Pelicans
are one player away.
Spurs will be somewhere in the mix. I would think they'll be in the play-in mix anyway. But yeah, all these young teams, all these teams who are just right in the mix.
And there's always a surprise team. One of them, there will be some random middle-ish kind of around 9-10. Maybe it's the Pelicans again. There's going to be one team that surprises you and kind of gets towards. The Timberwolves were this year, the Kings were last year. You always get one of those teams. So
Pelicans, the Grizzlies, they'll be back.
Grizzlies, absolutely.
Grizzlies got a lottery pick. They'll be right in the mix. They'll be in the playoffs next year. Like Grizzlies will be back in the playoffs. But Pelicans with Zion minus, I'm assuming they're going to trade Brandon Ingram. So whoever they get back for Ingram, that could be, maybe 2 role players, or if it's a star back with Zion, how he looked the last time we saw him before he got injured.
And he had
that could be a 4 or 5 3 seed. So you just never know. The West is going to continue to be loaded. And I'm very, very, very interested to see what happens this offseason. Obviously, we've got the finals to talk about, but
always the Warriors are in play to make a move. They're always in play to make some random move. You never know what. The Lakers probably stand pat, and then the Suns. The Suns are aiming for LeBron, so we'll see if they can get that done. I don't think it's happening, but
yeah. Rich Paul slipped and said, I forget what it was on. He was on some Gamecast. I forget what the hell it was, but he let it slip that they're going to opt out and that LeBron's going to be a free agent. So, I think if LeBron was smart, he goes to the East, get out of the West. But
Philly makes
I also
sense.
have a hard time believing he'll leave LA. He went there for business opportunities and all that. So we'll see.
The only reason why Phoenix makes sense a little bit. Obviously he's still really close to LA and kind of can the travel wise there. The only thing he'd have to do is he'd have to just take much less money. But at this point, I'm not sure if the money means a whole lot to him. You never know. And then obviously, I know the Suns are talking about possibly taking Bronny at, I think they have whatever their first round pick is. I think it's in the 20s. But they're thinking about taking Bronny there. And if they do that, maybe it's incentive.
They're going to take Bronny in the first round?
There's a little bit of speculation that they're looking at taking Bronny. And Bronny only worked out, I believe, with the Lakers.
Who said that? Where's the speculation coming from?
Nick Wright, who's actually in talks with LeBron and Rich Paul and all of them. So it's actually something that I took more into with that.
I don't believe anything draft related, basically until draft week. When it comes to the NBA,
and that's fair.
NFL.
That's what I'm saying. There's light speculation. I'm not saying that it's happening.
No, I know. I'm saying that sounds insane. I can't imagine Bronny's gonna go. Bronny shouldn't even be drafted. Second round, sure, on a flyer.
The Lakers might take him at 55 is also
that would make sense to me.
And that's where I think that's where he's probably going.
To waste a first round pick on him would be incompetent. That would be a fireable offense to me.
The only reason why you would do that is if you have if you're guaranteed LeBron. So it'd basically be like getting LeBron and Bronny for a first round pick. And you'd have to already have a ready made team. That's essentially what it is.
I don't see it. Like you said, with the lack of cap room that the Suns have, I don't see it.
I don't either. I don't either. I'm just saying Phoenix, if they could make it make sense, that would make sense for LeBron's. If he was to go to a different team, it would make sense location-wise and whatnot. But I think if he was to go to a team, Philly makes sense, Miami makes sense, Cleveland makes sense if you're going in the East. But we can talk way more about that in about 3 weeks. So let's move on to this NBA Finals. Half of it, as we said, we kind of expected. Boston made too much sense, and obviously they had one of the easier roads you'll see. Dallas, I thought they could get to the conference finals, but I didn't think anyone was beating the Nuggets. The Timberwolves did. They beat the Timberwolves. Shout out to Luka. He looks like he's fully healthy again. and so Kyrie is playing great basketball. Before we get into breaking this series down, where we got our predictions going on, I've been seeing, obviously we've talked about media and how it is. I've been seeing like Kyrie change his legacy with the fact of him playing great this year, and then where he ranks Robin all time now if they win a championship, and then it's also no, I'm just saying like those two, and then the best the best offensive backcourt of all time. What are any of your thoughts on those? I'm just curious because I like your opinion, and I actually value the non-media thought centric mind.
I did hear something about the Robin. That's a very arbitrary thing to just bring up. I think 1 and 2, no matter how you slice it, 1 and 2 got to be Pippen and young Kobe to Shaq. There's like you got 2 3-peats out of that, or if you want to say young Magic or old Kareem, however that. I wasn't alive for that, obviously, so I don't really know.
Think I might favor Wade, and I might favor, if you think of like someone like Kevin McHale. I know obviously people don't want to talk like about Kevin McHale, but I think he was a phenomenal Robin, kind of in sense.
Yeah, I mean McHale was great. Where I would split it with Wade was Wade had taken a step back by like 2013. Well, really after the streak in 2013, he seemed to get hurt in the playoffs. He took a step back. He was a great number 2, but Kobe was just, he was Kobe Bryant while Shaq was still Shaq. So it was just overpowering with those two, especially with them not having any other shot creators. So
by the end, you arguably had the two of the 3 best players in the league, and those two and Duncan on the same roster.
No, it was insane. It was insane. And again, their roster, like especially after 2001, like 2002, 2003, 2004, those last few years, that roster was shit around them. Like they had no youth, no versatility really, and
Malone and Peyton.
And they were good. I mean, look, that worked for them. That worked for them.
Did.
Karl Malone got injured that season, and then Kobe and Shaq were. I mean, there's many reasons why I wish Kobe were alive, but I really wish we would have got a documentary of that season, because I don't think people realize. You probably don't realize. I mean, you would have been 7 at the time. Like those two hated each other. Like Phil Jackson.
I've like read and heard, but obviously I didn't live it, so I don't know.
Phil Jackson had a couple books. He released one after that season because he retired just for that season, and part of it was because he could not coach Kobe. He literally like that. A lot of that book was just like very scathing to Kobe, and he released another book, I think after 2010 when he retired, about like all 11 rings and this and that. That one I read, and he detailed that 04 season about how they literally, Shaq would have to come in through one end of the stadium, Kobe would have to come in through the other. They couldn't be in the locker room at the same time. It's amazing that team even got to the finals, truly, even with that talent. Because, again, with that time, with Malone and Gary Payton, that did balance out their roster much more than 03 and 02, even though they won it in 02. But real hate. Not teammate hate, not a little bit of beef. Like, those two,
not
care.
Draymond and KD.
Not Draymond and KD. And that almost, I guess that got close. But, I mean, no, these two hated each other. And I don't care what Shaq says. Shaq will try to downplay it now, which is fine.
Hey, Kobe, show me how my...
yeah, show me how my ass tastes. Those two in 04, probably up until, I don't know, probably till Kobe got his ring against the Magic. Those two hated each other. Really, actually, I think Kobe's even said it. Up until Kobe played with Dwight, he said he didn't appreciate Shaq up until that Dwight Howard experience. So, but those two, like for our younger listeners or anybody who's not familiar, just go look up the Kobe and Shaq beef. Like those two real hated each other and had to play that whole entire season with each other. And on top of that, Kobe's emerging into the number one and Shaq's fading just into a different part of his career. It was just a crazy dynamic. Damn, I got off on a tangent. Your original question though, the Robins, that's so arbitrary. I don't even like, cool. Yeah. I mean, Kyrie technically would be because he got one with LeBron and because he got one with Luka if they were to win. Sure, yeah, he would be somewhere on the list, but I mean, it's not like you would pass Pippen. You would, 6
that's
rings.
what I thought was crazy. Like I don't
Not
even
like
think that's a question about Pippen.
yeah.
Like, even if you want to say, like, even if you want to try to make the argument, well, like Kobe wasn't a Robin, even though he was clearly, but just because obviously Kobe became so great, like clearly Pippen is one, and it's not really close. Like when you get six, I think it's like at some point it's like I mean, and shout out to some of the young Sam Jones. Sam Jones got to be in conversation. John Havlicek's got to be a little bit in the conversation too, because I mean they did get a lot of championships together, so they kind of got to be in the. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain, possibly. I mean, Jerry West might have been the best player on that team, or Jerry West, and that. But anyways, yeah. No, I thought that was like, why are we talking about this? This kind of seems really odd. But Celtics, Mavericks.
Well, hold on. I want to answer the other part.
Oh yeah, I did ask three. I did have like a 3-part one
question. You said about like best backcourt.
Yeah.
Someone, I forget who it was. Someone said most talented like a week or two ago.
Stan Van Gundy said it on the telecast. Reggie backed him on that, and then it was kind of floating throughout all sports media, and then
yeah, I mean TNT kind of turned into ESPN with that because it almost seemed like they like to talk about it after. Granted, it was a blowout in Game 5, but it almost seemed like they were kind of forcing that. But I'm gonna keep it to ESPN though. I know like TNT said it, or someone who worked for TNT said it, but ESPN oftentimes I feel like if you're watching a regular season game, could be a playoff game, but especially a regular season game, they'll just like they'll talk about these players like how people on the internet talk about these players. So like if it was the Timberwolves and Anthony Edwards got an and one at the rim, they'd be like, you know, I don't know, top 5 shooting guard in the league right now, top 3 like where you don't have to qualify it. There's no qualifiers you need when you're watching these players. You don't have to dumb it down that much to your audience. And I think they oftentimes just speak in online jargon like that, or in too much, you know, top 3, the best, you could argue this, or, you know, having to throw out these two are the best backcourt in the league or the most talented of all time. Yeah, they might be. They probably are the most talented, but we weren't even talking about that when they were in the second round, when in the first round. We only brought it up because they made it to the conference finals. With anything,
saying that last year.
Exactly. With anything like this, I'm cool with that. Look, of course, like just getting their own shot, it's hard to beat that backcourt of Luka and Kyrie. Those are two of the best shot creators of all time. So yeah, of course they're super talented, and they probably are, again, the most talented backcourt of all time. But, you know, let's wait for this finals to happen. Like if they lose the finals, do all of a sudden they become not the best backcourt of all time? Like, does that change? That wouldn't change to me. But you know, let's see. I mean, who knows? This could all end next year for all we know. If one of them, hope this wouldn't happen, knock on wood. But if, you know, someone got a serious injury, you just never know with these things. There's got to be tenure built up, all of that. There's got to be numbers behind it. But yes, just game.
Why Steph and Clay to me are just that's a conversation. And if you want Jerry West, Kel Goodrich, or there's a few others, but
yeah.
Like
and if we're talking talent, I wouldn't have Steph and Clay with Kyrie and Luka, especially in the Clay department. You know, Clay's just not the most.
It really would just be the Clay department of that, because obviously Steph is just as talented as either one of them. But like Clay, he doesn't have the ball handling skills as they do. Like obviously, that's why they're the greatest shooting backcourt of all time, and it's not close. But
sure. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, what we could have said that. What if years ago when Chris Paul and Harden were together, you could have made some sort of argument.
Kyrie and Harden,
yeah, I forget they played together too.
But I mean, there's plenty of times where, I mean, depending on the time, Nash and Kobe. I mean, I wish Nash was in his prime more, but like,
Nash unfortunately seemed to, you know, his career gave out literally as soon as he signed with the Lakers. That could have been.
So like, there's a lot of situations where like things could have happened. I mean, you want to count LeBron as a one? Well, LeBron and Wade. But
I was actually going to mention that, Keenan. I remember sometime, probably on ESPN or somewhere, they brought up something like that, like best backcourts of all times, and a couple people did that. They're like, well, LeBron has the ball a lot. Why don't we count LeBron and Wade? And it just got away. You know what I mean? People had LeBron and Wade in there when, yeah, LeBron is a one on offense. He's not really a one on defense. Same with Luka. Luka's a one on offense, plays a wing. But I consider
Yeah.
Luka more a guard than LeBron, I guess. But
Oh, I do too. But I mean, if it was LeBron and Wade, they're one. Like I understand. To me, that is, even though Kyrie and Luka are like right close to that conversation offensively. But tangent again. Who wins and why?
Who wins and why? I think it's the Celtics. I do. I had Celtics in 7 originally over the Nuggets, and I think I had that in the preseason too.
That was your preseason.
And I'll say this: had the Nuggets made it this far, I might have flipped on it. I might have flipped to Nuggets in 7. Either way, Keenan, I think the Celtics are incredibly hard to beat. I know people are going to point to. I mean, we mentioned this last time. Their lack of tough schedule in the playoffs. You can't choose that. You can't choose who you play. You can't choose that, Jimmy Butler and Halliburton got injured and, you can't choose all that stuff. And the Celtics handled their business. Donovan Mitchell got injured too, obviously. But we would be up here killing them if any of those series made it to 6 games. They all went 5 or they got swept. They did what they were supposed to do. On top of that, they looked great doing it, especially in that Pacers series. I think maybe even last year, that Celtics team maybe gives up a game or two to the Pacers. Probably one game without Halliburton. But maybe they lose that game 1 with Halliburton. So, maybe that series goes 6 games if this was last year's team. I think Joe Mazzulla's gotten better. I think the Mavericks will have a coaching advantage. But a lot of the reasons why I thought the Timberwolves would have an advantage in this series, as far as their defense goes and as far as their big defenders against someone like Kyrie, Celtics just have a lot of bodies to throw at both Luka and Kyrie. You're not going to stop them, but you can slow Kyrie down. We've seen a little bit. And then on top of that, you flip it on the other end. Tough matchups for Kyrie on defense and Luka. You're going to have to guard Tatum. You're going to have to guard Brown. You're going to have to guard Derek White and Drew Holiday, who's playing his ass off right now. And you couple that with how the Celtics can make threes at an insane rate, which is the difference between them and the Timberwolves. It's a tough matchup. It's a tough ask of the Mavericks, of Luka Doncic, of Kyrie Irving, of Jason Kidd, the whole entire roster. It could get to 7 games. I think Lively being healthy is going to help, of course. But the Celtics have every single counter you would want against that team. And again, they just have that size advantage across the board. It seems like they match up very well. And again, the threes. There will be a game or two, of course, where maybe their threes aren't falling. And guess what? The Mavs can shoot with them. So, maybe if in that regard, maybe they each are making 15 threes a game. Maybe it just balances each other out. And in that case, I would take the Celtics defense over the Mavericks. So all signs to me point to the Celtics. Who knows? You just never know. And I think we discount this. We just discounted it in this series, Keenan, where Timberwolves had never been to the conference finals, at least with Anthony Edwards or anybody else there. Mavericks had been there. They had the experience. They were ready for that. I've heard a lot of former athletes say, or former NBA players say over the past week, like the Mavericks bodies were ready for that because, Luka and Kyrie and them, they've been to the conference finals. So they're conditioned for that. Whereas maybe Ant hasn't played this deep into the season. Same thing here. Celtics have been to the finals. A lot of their core has been in these big games in the finals, deep playoff runs. Mavericks haven't made it to June. Kyrie has. Obviously, Jason Kidd has. It's not going to matter with Luka. I don't think we're going to get a, subpar Luka series here. But, the other guys, PJ Washington, Lively, all those young guys, I think that's where you'll see a difference with guys like Al Horford. And then on top of all that, Keenan, top of everything I just said, they got Kristaps Porzingis coming back. You got a 7'3" guy who can at least defend a little bit on a switch, who can grab rebounds.
He's been playing great defense this year.
Yeah, who can protect the rim, who can shoot the three himself, and he's just a matchup problem in his own right. So you add that to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Al Horford, and you got shooters off the bench. Literally everyone who they put in can shoot the ball. Every single one of them. It's going to be tough for the Mavericks to overcome, unless Luka averages 35 and Kyrie averages something like 25. Then we can talk. I do see Celtics in 6. What do you have? I'm interested to hear.
I'm going to save the prediction towards the end, but I think for the Mavs to win this series, it's going to have to look a little bit like the Cavs 2016, where you had LeBron going insane, like statistically, and just playing the game well, that's going to have to be Luka, and Kyrie's just going to have to play exactly like Kyrie did. And then you need two other role players to come along. If it's PJ Washington making timely threes as he did all conference finals, if it's Derek Jones getting putbacks, playing good defense on the perimeter, Derek Lively still doing great in the pick and roll big position, making plays out of that, but also finishing at the basket. You're going to need all of that against Boston because Boston's got 4 bodies they can throw at Luka. They got 3 bodies truly that they can throw at Kyrie Irving. And the difference between the bodies that they can throw and the bodies that the Timberwolves are going to throw at the Mavericks, where one of them was going to have to be Anthony Edwards, to where he got tired when he was guarding Kyrie and then a little bit when he was guarding Luka, and it kind of bothered him a little bit. Obviously, you had Alexander Walker, you had Jaden McDaniels, so you had multiple people who could play, but then you had Rudy Gobert, who did as good as you can. I don't think it was a problem, and Karl Anthony Towns, who aren't the greatest defenders. They played as well as you can play defensively, and I was impressed both of them defensively throughout these playoffs, but they were still mismatches on Luka, more so than what Jason Tatum playing a forward is, what Al Horford still is doing in, I think, year 17, and what Kristaps Porzingis will be doing when he comes back. So I actually agree with you. I've had Celtics in 6 since the second this started. I feel like it's going to be trendy for people to pick the Mavericks because they have the best player in the series in Luka. Obviously, the Celtics seem to get a lot of hate just because they're the Celtics for some reason. Like I want the Celtics to win this series in a personal bias because I'm just getting sick and tired of like Tatum slander. I'm not even a Celtics like true fan, but like I'm just sick of Jason Tatum slander of like, oh, is he really that good? Yes, he is really that good. He just came off 30, 10, and 6 in the conference finals and didn't even win player of the conference finals. He's really that good. And then obviously they have so much depth. They have so much shooting. With Kristaps Porzingis, you got a guy who can defend the rim. You've got a true guy who can pull Derek Lively away from the basket. That's something that the Timberwolves didn't have. You didn't have to have Derek Lively on Karl Anthony Towns. They don't really run Karl Anthony Towns at the 5 all that often. With Naz Reid, they seemed a lot of Gobert. But you have a guy in Porzingis who is 7'3", so you have a better rim protector than Naz and Cat. Plus, he can take you 25 out. So Lively has to guard out because he can't switch obviously on. He can't hide on Tatum. He can't hide on Drew Holiday. He can't hide on Derek White. He can't hide on Jaylen Brown. I just think that there's too many options for the Celtics to win. And then Jason Tatum can match Luka. We've seen him match Giannis. We've seen him on different occasions match Jimmy Butler, even though Jimmy Butler has gotten the better of him over the series that they've played. He can match your best player, and he has a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. The last finals he played in, he wasn't great. Jaylen Brown was the better player, and we know Jaylen Brown can be a very good number 2. So even if you want to say Luka, Kyrie edges out Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, sure. But I'm going to take Derek White, I'm going to take Drew Holiday, I'm going to take Peyton Pritchard, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis over Derek Lively, Derek Jones Jr., PJ Washington. So I have Celtics in 6. I think that they match up too well. And offensively, it's not like the Timberwolves where they have like 2 real offensive options. The Celtics have 5 people who can go get you 20, and they have a guy in Drew Holiday who's already won a championship, making huge plays throughout that entirety of those playoff runs, especially in the finals. So Celtics in 6, I think more people probably should be on the Celtics than I think are going to be over this next week when we see a lot of predictions come out.
You're probably right about that second part. I've mentioned on here, I've had a complicated relationship with the Celtics, really post Brad Stevens era. Like people, like you'll mention, like your Celtics, or people will hit me up about the Celtics, and I don't want to say I'm not a fan of the Celtics anymore. I'm not going to go that far, but it's not as serious as like the Patriots, and I've said that on here. Like the Patriots are my number 1, but
no, the Patriots definitely not as serious. Are the number 1 the team,
and it's definitely not. It's definitely not as serious as me being a Celtics fan. Maybe I don't know, 2007 through Like I said,
Yeah.
21 probably. 21 was probably the last year like I really like was watching every home game, like just completely invested, right? That being said, I have the same reaction to you. The way these people are talking about the Celtics, this happens with other teams. This doesn't happen just to the Celtics, but Tatum I think is 26, right? Luka's 25. Jalen, that means he's 26, 27, 28.
I
Like
think he's
still
20,
young,
27. I think
still
Jason.
young guys. And they've been in the conference finals 5 times out of the 7 times they've been in the postseason or something like that, or out of the last 7 years they've been to the conference
Jason
finals
Tatum's
5
been
times.
to the conference finals 6 times, I want to say.
So, it's kind of, I think Tatum's first year was LeBron's last year in Cleveland, right?
Conference
And
finals.
it's not like Tatum was the sole reason they made the conference finals. That was a team effort, but I mean, he eventually became the number one option because Kyrie was out that entire postseason.
He did punch on LeBron too, which was
he punched on LeBron. A lot of these years, the Celtics were not the betting favorite to go, or not just the favorite in general. 2019, excuse me, 2019. That's Kyrie's last year there. They should have been. They absolutely should have been. We know what happened there. We discussed it last year. 2020, I don't think they were the favorite coming out the East that year. I liked them more than anybody coming out of the East, and then that was an extremely weird year. They lost to the Heat. 21, they flamed out. Whatever. 22, nobody had them going to the finals with Ime Udoka in his first year. They go to the finals. We know what happened last year. They choked a little bit, whatever, but they were still in the conference finals in a game 7. Like, they've been wildly successful. And, if you want to say they underachieved last year, fine. But by and large, Tatum and Brown have exceeded expectations. Brad Stevens, when he was the coach, exceeded expectations. Udoka definitely exceeded expectations that first year making the finals. And Mazzulla certainly has exceeded expectations. So, I mean, props to them. People are talking about Tatum like he's Joel Embiid. And there's always been some Celtics hate in the media, whatever. But this is the worst I've ever seen it. There genuinely feels like to be a anti-Celtics bias, and I don't know why or what reason. If this was Timberwolves Celtics, for the reasons we just laid out, Keenan, I think a lot of people would be on the Timberwolves, and I think that would even somehow still be a favorable matchup for the Celtics, just given their depth still. The size would be a little bit of an issue, but it would still take a lot for Towns and Edwards to overcome the Celtics' depth. I don't know. And I think the Timberwolves are a better matchup than the Mavericks. I think that where it gets fascinating with the Mavericks is the rate they can shoot threes. And obviously Kyrie and Luka getting their own shots. So if they can match it on offense, then we're really going to have a series. But if Dallas has trouble matching the 3-point percentage and the Celtics are defending the 3 very well on the other end, it could be a short series for the Mavericks. They could get out of here in 5. I don't expect that to happen. I really don't. But it could happen. It's conceivable. The Celtics really are that deep. Sure, maybe the East was a little weak. But again, you can't choose who you play. The East was weak. Almost LeBron's entire tenure. The second time with the Cavs, really didn't have to play many teams of a tough stature. So, I don't know. It's almost making me jump back on the Celtics bandwagon again. I'm not saying I completely left. It's just not as serious, but I'm seeing people talk about them like this is like Joel Embiid, someone who really is coming up short, who's not matching his stats from the previous, regular season, that type of thing. It's not what we're getting at all. And I thought the Celtics handled their business a lot better than I thought against the Pacers. Last year's team definitely would have coughed up again. One of those games for sure, maybe even 2.
They let the Hawks get 2 on them a couple years back. They let the Hawks get 2. So, no, that I agree with you 100%.
And again, these guys are still young too. Brown and Tatum and all those guys, they're
26 and 27 years old. Like Jason Tatum, since he's been an All NBA caliber player, is averaging 26, 9, and 6 in the playoffs. I'm gonna take that. That's fine. I really don't understand where he's clearly a top 7 player, and we talk about him like he's maybe borderline top 12. Like you talk
on the other side of that, you're going to hear a lot of Celtics fans who want Tatum to be mentioned in the Luka class, where I don't think he is. I don't think Tatum's close. He's as close as you can be to Luka, Jokic, and all those guys without being him, right? Like
he's his own tier. He's like his own lane.
He's
really
the separator. Odd. He's the separator between like LeBron and I guess Durant now and all those guys, and then your top five. I'd put Ant actually in that tier too, where Tatum is. I think Ant's right there. And I think Tatum's a more complete player than Ant.
Yep.
But yeah, I think
Ant's gotten to that point.
I'd put Ant in that tier as well. But
Jokic, Giannis, Luka are like your top three. And then like it's odd because right next would be kind of Embiid, Tatum, Anthony Edwards in some sort of order, roughly around SGA too. Yep, absolutely. SGA. And then you have Kevin Durant, Steph, LeBron,
Booker,
Jalen Brunson's got himself up there. I didn't know who'd you just say?
Devin Booker.
Devin Booker's around that too. Obviously, Jimmy's taken a little bit of a step back. And then there's Anthony Davis would have to be around that too. I'm going to go through the list once the finals is over, and I'm excited to do so because that's some of my favorite thing to do. Last point I want to make on Tatum.
Sure.
He put up 39, 11, and 5 against the Mavericks in the first game they played, and then 32, 8, and 3 in the second game they played. So he's played okay against the Mavericks thus far. And
absolutely. Last props I'll give Tatum and Brown specifically because I've seen a lot of growth, especially in the second half of the season from Jaylen Brown. But those guys, they don't do a lot of the load management. They play every night. They play both ends. Jaylen, he kind of fell back on defense, I'd say, for a couple years there, but he's still a tough matchup defensively and offensively. But no, those guys, they play hard. They've always played hard. They've always shown up. And their playoff downfalls. Maybe they have poor shooting performances. Maybe they're not getting the shots you like, but it's not. He's in the corner not asking for the ball. Like Tyrese Halliburton we've seen in some games, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that type of thing. Not 2011 LeBron, 2010 LeBron in the postseason. It's none of that. They go down swinging. But they got to get their props as a team, and they're a 64-win team. That's the entire league. That's not just the East they're playing the entire league. So, yeah, I don't like the disrespect they're getting headed into this postseason. I don't understand it. But let's transition because I think we're going to talk more finals this week as well before we get there. But let's transition, Keenan, to a topic we've been talking about. Actually, matter of fact, Keenan, why don't we do this? Let's make that a part 2. So we'll end this episode right here. So this was the Warner Brothas Podcast. You got our mini NBA finals prediction, Celtics versus Mavs. We each got Celtics in 6. You guys on our media tip again. Talked a little UFC at the beginning. But yeah. I mean, Keen, let me say this before we do move on. Weird postseason, very weird postseason where it feels almost uncompetitive. It felt like an uncompetitive postseason, like overall, like top to bottom, but a very entertaining postseason. Like it's going to be memorable. I'm going to remember a lot of things from these playoffs. I think. Who knows? You do lose the small details over time, but
in the moment, it didn't always feel like this is the playoffs. And then I'm going to look back on it in about 2 weeks and be like, man, there was a lot of moments in these playoffs. You had like the true emergence of Anthony Edwards. You had Jalen Brunson really kind of like obviously he was coming onto the scene, but then he really just splashed on. Obviously it's going to be a lot of things, but yeah, I agree with that.
Other thing I would say, and we've mentioned the WNBA our last few episodes, but with the playoffs going on and the WNBA like still in their infancy stage of their season, like they're still in the first 10 games, still feels very fresh. It's got a real just a basketball season, like in totality, a basketball season feel. Like we got the NBA, we got the WNBA, and the WNBA is doing a fantastic job of scheduling games. Like it seems like they've got marquee. I mean, granted they got a smaller league, they got less teams, but it seems like there's marquee matchups every weekend. Like specifically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're getting these good matchups. I see a lot of discourse about the Is it Kennedy Carter? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yeah, Kennedy.
Kennedy.
It's odd. It's
Kennedy with a CH.
It's CH,
Okay,
but it's Kennedy.
okay.
It's really odd.
I like that. So Kennedy Carter checking Caitlin Clark. I like it. I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. I love the distaste and just the genuine, like, we don't fuck with the other team. We're going to welcome Caitlin Clark to this league. Like, there's a genuine just animosity in the league that the NBA has lacked for, I'd say, 15 years, maybe even more than that. And the WNBA has it. And I just love where they are. They're going to be in a great spot heading into the Olympics. On top of that, right after the NBA Finals, pretty much. I think it's going to be great for their league and great for the sport. That being said, again, this was the Warner Brothas Podcast. Kyle, of course, Keenan. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on TikTok. Check us out on Instagram. We'll be back. Check out part 2, Warner Brothas Podcast. We're out.
Like a man.